The night of June 5th, 1944. Over the dark, choppy waters of the English Channel, a vast armada of C-47 transport planes drones steadily towards the coast of Normandy. Inside these vibrating metal shells are thousands of young American paratroopers from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions. They are the tip of the spear for the largest amphibious invasion in human history, Operation Overlord. These men are volunteers, the elite, trained to jump from the sky into the heart of enemy territory, to sow chaos and confusion, to secure the vital causeways and bridges, and to prevent German reinforcements from reaching the beaches, where in a few short hours the fate of the free world will be decided. Inside one of these planes sits a 26-year-old first lieutenant named Richard Winters. He is not a large man, nor is he a loud one. In a sea of boisterous, adrenaline-fueled young men, he is an island of quiet calm. He checks his gear, then the gear of the men around him. He is the newly appointed commander of Easy Company, 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. He was never meant to have this command, not yet, but the incompetence of his predecessor had forced a change. Now, on the eve of the most important battle of his life, the lives of over 100 men rest squarely on his shoulders. As the French coastline appears, the night erupts into a terrifying wall of fire. German anti-aircraft guns, the dreaded 88s, tear through the sky, ripping planes apart in brilliant, horrifying explosions. The C-47s are thrown about like toys. Inside, men are screaming, praying, vomiting from a combination of air sickness and pure terror. The meticulously planned drop zones are instantly forgotten. This is no longer a coordinated military operation. It is a desperate struggle for survival. Winters feels the plane lurch violently as the green light flashes on. Go! The men begin to pour out into the fiery chaos. When his turn comes, he jumps into the blackness, into a whirlwind of tracer fire and exploding shells. He lands hard, alone, in a field near the town of Sainte-Mère-Église. His rifle is gone, torn from him during the jump. All he has is his trench knife. He is a commander with no men, a soldier with no weapon, lost deep behind enemy lines. In that moment of profound isolation and danger, standing in the dark fields of Normandy, Richard Winters makes a simple promise to God, a promise he will repeat before every battle. Lord, just get me through this, and I'll live the rest of my life in peace. This is the story of how that quiet man kept his promise, and in doing so, became the standard by which all combat leadership would be measured. To understand the man who would command the legendary Band of Brothers, you must first understand the quiet soil from which he grew. Richard Winters was born in 1918 and raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in a family with deep Mennonite roots, a faith known for its pacifism and humility. He was not raised to be a warrior. He was raised with a strong work ethic, a quiet sense of duty, and an unshakable moral compass. He was an excellent student, graduating from Franklin and Marshall College with a degree in business, his mind trained for logic, efficiency, and calm analysis, traits that would later prove more valuable on the battlefield than brute force. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Winters, like millions of other young American men, knew his life was about to change forever.
He enlisted in the army, but he was not content to be just another soldier. He was drawn to the newest, most challenging branch of the infantry, the paratroopers. It was a service composed entirely of volunteers, men who chose to run towards the greatest danger. The promise of extra pay was an incentive, but the true draw was the chance to be part of an elite brotherhood. His journey began in the summer of 1942 at Camp Toccoa, Georgia. Toccoa was a crucible, a place designed to break men down and rebuild them into something harder, stronger. The training was brutal, arguably the toughest in the entire U.S. Army. The centerpiece of their torment was a 3-mile run up and a 3-mile run down a steep mountain called Currahee. 3 miles up, 3 miles down became their mantra, a symbol of their shared hardship and growing identity. The word Currahee was Cherokee for "stands alone," a fitting motto for a unit that would soon be fighting isolated and surrounded. It was here at Toccoa that the character of Easy Company was forged, and it was here that the men first recognized the quiet competence of Lieutenant Winters, and they did so largely by contrasting him with their first company commander, Captain Herbert Sobel. Sobel was a tyrant, a master of petty discipline and grueling training exercises. He pushed the men of Easy Company to their absolute physical limits, and in doing so, unintentionally made them one of the fittest and most cohesive units in the entire airborne. But he was also a terrible leader of men. He was vindictive, insecure, and possessed shockingly poor judgment in the field. He would get lost on simple navigation exercises and blame his NCOs. His tactical decisions were nonsensical. The men of Easy Company respected his ability to train them, but they despised him as a man. And more importantly, they did not trust him to lead them in combat. They knew he would get them all killed. Winters was his opposite in every conceivable way. Where Sobel was loud and arrogant, Winters was quiet and humble. Where Sobel would scream and punish, Winters would lead by example, never asking a man to do something he wouldn't do himself. He was always the first to run up Currahee, the last to complain. He was fair, consistent, and possessed an innate tactical intelligence that the men could see even in training exercises. The loyalty of the company began to shift, quietly but decisively, from their hated captain to their respected lieutenant. This simmering conflict finally boiled over in England, just months before the D-Day invasion. After Sobel unjustly punished Winters for a minor infraction, Winters, knowing his integrity was on the line, refused the punishment and demanded a court-martial. It was a massive gamble that could have ended his career. Seeing this as an opportunity, a group of the company's non-commissioned officers, the sergeants who formed the backbone of the unit, mutinied.
The chaos of the D-Day drop was absolute. Winters landed far from his intended drop zone, alone with only a trench knife. The night was a disorienting symphony of gunfire, explosions, and the distant, haunting cries of men. His training, however, took over. The first priority was to find his men. He began to move cautiously through the hedgerows, a landscape of small, sunken roads and thick bushes that provided perfect cover for German ambushes. One by one, he linked up with other lost paratroopers, a man from the 82nd Airborne, a few of his own men from Easy Company.
He was no longer just a lieutenant. He was the highest-ranking officer in this small ragtag group. Leadership was not a choice, it was a necessity. By morning, he had gathered about a dozen men and made his way to the company's objective near the small village of Le Grand Chemin. It was there he was given a mission that would become legendary in the annals of military history. He was ordered to take his small force and destroy a battery of 4 German 105mm howitzers located at a farm called Brécourt Manor. These guns were firing directly onto Utah Beach, tearing apart the American landing craft and threatening the entire invasion. They had to be silenced. When Winters did a quick reconnaissance, his heart sank. The guns were positioned in a long trench, protected by nests of MG-42 machine guns, and defended by an estimated platoon of 50 to 60 veteran German soldiers. Winters had a dozen men. The odds were suicidal. But there was no alternative. The fate of the men on the beaches depended on it. What happened next is still taught at the West Point Military Academy as a textbook example of small unit tactics and leadership under fire. Winters did not order a frontal assault. That would have been a massacre. Instead, his mind, trained for calm, logical analysis, broke the problem down into manageable parts. He set up a base of fire with 2 machine guns to suppress the Germans. Then he led a small assault team, including men like Sergeant Buck Compton and Sergeant Carwood Lipton, in a flanking maneuver. They crawled through a field, using the hedgerows for cover, until they were close to the first gun position. On Winters' command, they rose as one and threw a volley of grenades, then charged, firing their rifles and submachine guns. The German crew was overwhelmed. 1 gun down. But the battle had just begun. The trenches connecting the gun positions were a death trap. Winters organized the assault on the second gun, using the first captured position as a new base of fire. He personally ran out into the open under heavy machine gun fire to direct his men, a moment of incredible bravery that inspired them all. He was a whirlwind of controlled energy, always thinking, always moving, always leading from the front. One by one, they took the guns. They used captured German machine guns against their former owners. They found a map in the German command post that showed every single German artillery and defensive position in the entire Utah Beach sector, an intelligence find of incalculable value. After destroying all 4 guns and neutralizing the enemy force, Winters and his small band of brothers withdrew, having suffered only a handful of casualties. In the space of a few hours, with just a dozen men, he had saved hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives on the beach. For this action, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, the nation's 2nd highest award for valor. He should have received the Medal of Honor. But for Dick Winters, the only reward that mattered was the respect of his men and the knowledge that he had not failed them.
Normandy was just the beginning. The story of Easy Company and of Dick Winters' leadership was a story of endurance, of moving from one brutal campaign to the next. In September of 1944, they jumped into Holland as part of Operation Market Garden, a bold but ultimately failed Allied attempt to end the war by Christmas. It was here, at a lonely crossroads in Holland, that Winters led another legendary assault.
He and a single platoon of about 30 men from Easy Company encountered and decisively defeated 2 full companies of elite German Waffen-SS soldiers, an enemy force that outnumbered them more than 5 to 1. Again, his tactical brilliance, using maneuver, surprise, and the superior training of his men, resulted in a stunning victory with minimal American casualties. He was now a captain, the respected and admired commander of the entire company. But it was in the winter of 1944 that Easy Company would face its greatest test, a trial that would push them to the absolute limits of human endurance. In December, Hitler launched his last great offensive in the West, a massive surprise attack through the Ardennes forest of Belgium that became known as the Battle of the Bulge. The 101st Airborne Division, rushed to the front with no winter clothing, inadequate ammunition, and little food, was ordered to hold the vital crossroads town of Bastogne at all costs. They were quickly surrounded. The battle for Bastogne was not a battle of tactics, it was a battle of pure will. The men of Easy Company dug foxholes in the frozen, snow-covered ground of the Bois-Jacques forest, enduring relentless, terrifying artillery barrages from the Germans. The temperature plummeted far below freezing. Men suffered from frostbite, trench foot, and severe malnutrition. It was a miserable, soul-crushing existence. Here, Winter's leadership evolved. It was no longer just about tactics. It was about morale. It was about keeping his men from breaking. He was a constant presence on the line, moving from foxhole to foxhole, speaking to each man, checking on their supplies, making sure they knew they were not forgotten. He shared their misery, ate the same meager rations, and endured the same shelling. He projected an aura of unshakable calm and confidence that became the bedrock of the company's morale. He never told his men that everything would be all right, but his presence made them believe it. After the siege of Bastogne was broken, Easy Company was given the task of leading the assault on the nearby village of Foy. By now, Winters had been promoted to battalion executive officer, and the command of Easy Company had fallen to a new, inexperienced lieutenant named Norman Dyke. The assault was a disaster. Dyke froze under pressure, panicking and giving contradictory orders, leaving his men pinned down and being slaughtered in an open field. Watching this unfold from his command post, Winters knew he had to act. In a split-second decision, he ran through the intense German fire, relieved Dyke of command on the spot, and personally took charge of the assault. He reorganized the men, got them moving, and led them to victory. He had once again risked his own life to save the men he felt so deeply responsible for. It was the ultimate act of leadership, taking accountability when everything was falling apart.
As the German army crumbled, Easy Company pushed deep into Germany itself. And it was there, near the town of Landsberg, that they stumbled upon something for which no training could have ever prepared them. They discovered a Kaufering sub-camp of the Dachau concentration camp system. What they saw there would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The walking skeletons, the piles of emaciated bodies, the hollow, vacant eyes of the survivors, the overpowering stench of death and human misery. These hardened paratroopers, men who had seen the worst of combat, were rendered silent and numb by the sheer industrial scale of the horror. Winters, ever the stoic commander, simply ordered his men to find food and water for the survivors. But the discovery profoundly changed them all. It gave a face to the evil they had been fighting for so long. It was no longer an abstract war against an enemy army. It was a crusade against an ideology that could produce such profound darkness. The war in Europe for easy company ended in the most symbolic of places, Berchtesgaden, a picturesque town in the Bavarian Alps that was home to Hitler's mountain retreat, the Eagle's Nest. There, amidst the breathtaking beauty of the mountains, the men who had jumped into Normandy, fought in Holland, and frozen in Bastogne, finally had a chance to breathe. The war was over. They had survived. Dick Winters, now a major, had offers to remain in the army. His career was bright, but he had made a promise to God in the dark fields of Normandy. He had asked only to survive, and in return, he would live a quiet life of peace. He was a man of his word. He left the army, returned to Pennsylvania, and married his sweetheart. He worked for his wife's family business, eventually starting his own company, selling animal feed to farmers. He bought a small farm and raised 2 children. He never sought fame or glory. For decades, he was just a quiet, successful businessman in rural Pennsylvania. He remained in close contact with the men of his company, writing letters and attending their reunions, but he rarely spoke of the war to anyone else. He did not see himself as a hero. In fact, he disliked the term. In his mind, the only heroes were the ones who did not come back. He believed that leadership was a duty, not a path to glory, and that he had simply done his job. He had been entrusted with the lives of his men, and he had done everything in his power not to fail them.
The story of Major Dick Winters and Easy Company was largely unknown to the wider world for over 50 years, until the historian Stephen Ambrose wrote his best-selling book, Band of Brothers, which was later turned into the acclaimed HBO miniseries. Only then did the world learn of the quiet leader from Pennsylvania and the incredible odyssey of the men he led. Winters' legacy is not just one of tactical brilliance or battlefield courage. It is a legacy of character. He led not through fear or intimidation, but through competence, integrity, and a profound sense of responsibility for his men. He was a leader who ate last, who suffered alongside his soldiers, and whose calm presence gave them the strength to endure the unendurable. He embodied an ideal of leadership that is timeless. Late in his life, when asked by his granddaughter how he could be a hero when he had killed people in the war, he thought for a long time. Finally, he wrote her a letter, trying to explain the paradox of his life. "Grandma and I have been watching the sunsets from our front porch," he wrote, "and I've thought about your question a lot. I am not a hero, but I have served in a company of heroes." He never glorified war. He saw it as a grim, tragic necessity. The promise he had made on D-Day was the promise he kept for over 65 years. He found his peace. In one of his final interviews, he offered his own definition of a hero, a definition forged in the crucible of combat and tempered by a lifetime of quiet reflection. "If you can," he said, "find a way to live a quiet life of peace in a foxhole, then you are a hero." By his own measure, and by the measure of all who knew his story, Major Richard Winters was one of the greatest heroes of his generation.